Hello, everyone, and welcome to a day in the life of older multicultural Australians. The Polaron team would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Australia and their continued connection to land, sea, and the community. Before we begin, I'd like to start with the agenda. We will firstly introduce our panelists and hear from Polaron's founder before moving to our presentation, the panel discussion, and finally finishing with the Q&A. First up, I'd like to introduce Nikki Rittenhausen. Nicholas is the manager of the Center of Cultural Diversity in Aging and has significant experience in multicultural affairs, aged care, policy advocacy, social cohesion, project management, and community engagement. Wonderful to have you, Nikki. Next up, I would like to introduce Elliot Clifford. Elliot is a production manager at Icon Agency, working on the Department of Health and Aged Care's free translation service for aged care providers, big bodies, and PICACs. Thanks for joining us, Elliot. Thank you so much. We also have Daniela Ruiz. Daniela is a team leader and a specialist within the project management team here at Polaron, and she has an active role in working with multicultural communities across Australia. Hi, Daniela. Wonderful to have you here. Finally, I would also like to give a warm welcome to our founder, Eva Hussein. She's the director of Polaron Language Services. Eva is a certified translator, interpreter, and a NATI examiner. She will be our moderator for today. Over to you, Eva.
Thank you so much, Carla, and welcome everyone. Just a very brief word of introduction about Polaron. We are a translation and interpreting company. Have been around for, this is our 24th year, so quite some time. We do work with a network of probably about 1,500 translators and interpreters. Carla and Daniela work in the team, and every now and then we introduce different people that work at Polaron delivering quality translation and communication resources for multicultural communities. So we'll get you to go to the next slide. Thank you. Thanks. And I'm going to hand over to Daniela to take us through some statistics, which some of you might find a bit surprising, but those of you that have been actively working in aged care in whichever capacity, so whether you're a client, interpreter, or aged care provider, you may be familiar with the statistics, but they're nevertheless important to show today. So over to you, Daniela, please.
Thank you so much, Eva. So yes, as you mentioned, so the idea with this section is we are going to provide a very short summary about the main data, and looking forward to have the conversation with Elliot and Nikki.
Daniela, sorry, there's a bit of a feedback on the line, so I'm not sure if it's just me. Carla, can we hear Daniela okay?
Yes, I think there's like an echo.
A bit of echo.
Mm-hmm. Oh, just let me check.
Thank you.
I will bring my earphones. Just 1 second, please.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
I'll keep talking then to cover up the technical issues. So look, I have personally done lots of work in the aged care space, and with Nikki, we've known each other for quite some time. He's now the manager for Center for Cultural Diversity in Aging, but prior to that, we've had a long and fruitful relationship with the center. And we'll get Nicholas also to tell us about their work. But let's see if Daniela can speak now.
Okay, let's see if this is
any better.
Yay,
much better.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you so much. So we are going to talk about then some main statistics about the elder communities in Australia. So based on the last census, we can know that 4.2 people in Australia are 65 years old and over. This represents 16% of the total population of Australia. This is a good number to keep in mind. And based on that statistic, also, we can think that 16% of people, around 28% of them were born in non-speaking countries. So that means that they will have a background in culture and also in language. And 16% of them, 18, sorry, speak a language different to English at home. So that's why it's very relevant that we include different community languages to this elder community. And one interesting data as well is 400,000 people is using the different services, aged care services, home care, and transition care in Australia, which also show us a little bit better with the kind of resources, of public resources that they are getting into. We can go to the next one, Carla, please. Okay, so we have here some of the challenges that we can have with elder communities. So one of those is we always have to keep in mind that the elders need support, and 36% of those caregivers speak a language different than English. So that could be representing a challenge itself. Also, around 38% of the elders need help with some everyday things. And 5.2 of those elders need help with pretty much everything. So we need to also keep thinking in plans and how we can be flexible enough to create resources and solutions for them to allow them to be as independent as possible, trying to also respect their rights. And 83% of the elders that we have in Australia, they have physical problems, and 10% of them, they have problems with the vision. So that's why it's also relevant that we always try to develop resources thinking on those who cannot be able just to have access to the information on text. Some opportunities that we have identified, especially in the digital world, is 7 out of 10 elders have access to digital platforms. This is a good statistic because also invite us to think in a way that we can also provide them resources through the mobile phone, which is the device that they use the most. And they use it especially to check in their emails, their bank details, payment, and also one resource that is very important is watching videos. So they get informed through those challenges. And we need to keep in mind how we can be as accessible as possible. And when we talk accessibility, we also have to consider languages. Let's go to the next one, Carla, please. What are some of the benefits of producing resources in multicultural languages? One of those is when an elder receives information in their language and in an accessible way, he's going to feel that he can make important decisions. So we support them. The another one is we empower them to make choices, to be independent and preserving their dignity. We also help them to reducing loneliness and keep connected with their communities. Other benefit is by producing plain English, easy English, accessible resources, we can allow that everyone, regardless their educational level, is able to access to the information and make decisions with that. And of course, as we mentioned before, we are going to help the families and the caregivers to provide a better support to those elders and also to keep them informed and improve the service that they provide to the elders. Why is it important to talk about this? Because when we implement information in various languages, and when we think about how we can provide resources that are accessible, we are going to improve the quality of life of elder people and strengthen their connections. Let's go to the next one, Carla, please. Okay, and we have here just some tips how we can just keep connected and help the elder communities. First of all, keep it simple. Produce resources that are easy to understand. Don't use big words that probably the communities are unable to understand. Now we saw that they consume videos as well. So produce videos and audios, and also try to include subtitles when the words aren't enough. Make documents easy to read. This means also use big fonts for those who aren't able to have access to small fonts of letter. So create accessible resources. Use also options as e-readers. Speak their language, and speaking their language is not just the language itself, it's also their culture, their practices, their ways to see and live the world. That is quite important. Ask them what they want, ask them what they think. So here the invitation is co-design with elder communities. And finally, get involved to the caregivers across, because they are going to be the people that is going to support across the geography.
Thank you so much, Daniela. That was a very excellent presentation with lots of tips and points, important points about older Australians here. Here are some references. And I would like to continue to the panel discussions. So over to you, Eva.
Thanks, Carla and Daniela. So I'll get Elliot and Nikki to contribute. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that I'm probably kind of nearing the age where I need to start thinking about what's going to happen when I need extra support. And I often think about, people who may have dementia, or they may have limited literacy or language skills, and what will happen to them, or what happens to them. And I already have people make certain assumptions about me just based on my surname. So therefore, I imagine that if I go to an aged care facility, I'm going to get halal food, Arabic interpreter, and probably Middle Eastern music played. Hopefully that's not going to happen, and hopefully I'll have a say. But when we talk about communication, it really is important to look at a person at the end of the chain of communication. So Australian government's very much focused on providing services that are centered around the person. Nicholas, could you maybe tell us a bit more about what that looks like in practice?
Yes, thank you very much, Eva, and hello. And I really appreciate the opportunity to present the Center for Culture, Diversity and Aging here. I think in terms of person-centered care or consumer-centered care, I think when we look at the aged care quality standard, it's really important that the person is looked at from a holistic point of view, when it comes to culture, language, face, but also the diversity within the diversity of the person. So I really agree with you, Eva. I think it's really important that we look at it from a sort of holistic approach when we look at seniors from multicultural or diverse backgrounds. But you're right, we never should assume, because, for example, I've given an example, I speak Portuguese at home with my partner, but I was born in Australia, but you can hear my accent, but my first language is German. So that doesn't mean necessarily that if you have it through the ABS that you have to be very sort of nuanced in terms of feedback and understanding the person. So everyone is different and identifies with different languages or different cultures. Yeah.
So therefore, when we talk about an older multicultural Australian, there's no such thing, right? And Elliot, you are in the business of communication, so I was hoping that you could contribute at this point. One of the things you do in your day job is help people communicate, help service providers communicate in a respectful and culturally appropriate way to their residents, families, carers. There's quite a number of different people that you would be kind of crafting communication for. What does it look like at your end, and what would be significance of getting the message right when we talk about the aging population?
So the significance and the driving motivation for it would be to help the older Australians who are in an aged care service with choice, understanding, respect, and agency. Just for context, the particular part of the service that I work on is the free translation service. So it's a wonderful service. It's been a real privilege to be working on it. As well as with the other people on this panel. I work at Icon Agency. We are deploying this service on behalf of the Department of Health. And then if you wish to visit the service's website, we've got the URL behind me. Effectively, this service is to assist everything that's been discussed on this panel so far. Engagement, well, primarily communication to increase better outcomes of care. So increased understanding of an aged care service and therefore increased engagement, but also increased levels of respect and dignity, which are all pushed towards an increased standard of living. These are very, very important, valuable years for, individuals living here in Australia amongst the aged care system. And this service aims to help that. So yeah, the communication ideally helps to assist achieve those outcomes. Yeah.
And they are not that easy to achieve, I guess, because Australia is very diverse. And just today, actually, at one of the meetings I went to Carla with in Sydney, I learned that there are 1 million recipients in Australia of aged care services and 3,000 aged care service providers. And that varies from aged care homes to, I guess, services that assist people at home or whatever it may be. But where do you see that disconnect, I guess, between intention and what actually happens on the ground, and how do we bridge that gap?
There's actually, working on this for the last 18 months, there's been quite a few kind of complicated series of obstacles, I think, to overcome. And they're things, as you mentioned, that are on the ground. And then there's also more structural, things that are higher up the food chain. First and foremost, an awareness that there are services that are free to help with communication between aged care providers and recipients of care, so just general awareness that these programs even exist. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today to speak to that, alongside the great work that CCDA and Nikki do. So awareness of these services, but then also, we very much understand that everybody in the aged care sector is incredibly busy. Not only is their first priority to, keep people alive and keep people's standard of care as high as possible, that naturally involves a lot of busy work. It just comes with the job. These people don't have a great deal of time, and so always being mindful that to get these messages through to people, we have to be very, very kind of short, and we also have to be consistent. We have to constantly remind people that such services exist. And then once you get their attention, you need to reaffirm that services such as this are here to assist and to take away some of the work, not add extra work onto that particular aged care providers. It could be, a person who's a care coordinator on the ground. It could be somebody who's working in, say, if every aged care provider is structured differently or have different roles, but if it's, say, like a people advisory or procurement or, whoever it is that's looking after onboarding or caring for, older persons in an aged care system, none of them have their feet up. We definitely know that. They run off their feet. So that is a key challenge. Then there is, ensuring people that understand the difference between this particular translation service and something like TIS National.
Right.
So that's another wonderful service that I won't speak too much to because I don't work on that particular project. But yeah, I think I would start there, with an awareness of these services that they exist, and then trying to press upon people that once you do reach out for help, you're not opening the door to a great deal more work for yourself. They've been set up in order to, as seamlessly as possible, assist people with accomplishing whatever it is. And now whatever it is could be a range of things. It could be, a simple administrative form needs to be crafted into one language for one, for a particular cohort of people that speak a certain language within a residential aged care facility. Maybe there's a suite of documents that are all about the provision of care for these people. jobs big and small. Like we have been set up in order to facilitate that quite quickly, grab those documents, go away and do the work expertly, and then deliver it to that person, so that ideally the experience for the aged care provider is to focus on what's right in front of them, which is the older Australians in their care, whilst we're off in the background doing this work. And then we knock back on the door and go, here are some tools to help you communicate in language, preferred language, with the recipient of care.
And having worked with you for some time now, Elliot, I know how much you do care about that piece of communication to actually work. And certainly at Polaron, we always have in mind the person that's going to read the document or use the document, to make decisions about their lives, to feel empowered, and to be able to communicate. When I was doing a lot of active interpreting, I would often work in aged care, in particular, in situations where there was already a crisis. So I think a lot of the work that we do as part of the project, as part of the initiative, is to prevent and improve people's lives by informing them about the system in a language they understand. So thank you for saying what you just said. Nikki, you have been around for years. I want to say prior to CCDA, you were working also in the aged care space at Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria. Are things changing? Do you feel that we finally understand that on top of compliance and all the care that we have to, and respect that we have to give to the elderly, especially from multicultural backgrounds in the context of this conversation today? Are you seeing progress? I know that the centre is simply amazing at creating innovative solutions and resources for aged care providers that they can use. They are free, they are very clear and simple. What do you think is working, and where do you think the gaps are?
Thank you very much, Eva. And I think, look, we have both been in the multicultural sector around for quite a long time, and I see always sort of little progress, but I think some of the questions, they return to the surface again and again. If you read some of the previous reports that were done, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, some of the access and equity issues, they sort of remain. But I think what I've seen is, and I agree with Elliot, on one of the biggest challenges in aged care at the moment is the workforce issue. And that's across the care sectors, whether it's disability care, childcare, or aged care. And there is obviously a time shortage for people, and people even just being able to staff a facility or a service is obviously a huge challenge. So that's really important to make it, as easy for an aged care provider to be able to access translation. I think the free translation project is an excellent project. It was part of the previous following the Royal Commission and then the budget. So I think that's a really, huge step in the right direction. We never had that before. I can't remember that it was the case before. So that's a huge advancement. But I think in terms of when we talk about culturally appropriate care, there's obviously nuances to it. Like, when we talk about communication, whether it's plain English version, whether it's understanding people's culture when we translate materials, and the center's communication cards, which our most popular resource that we developed together with you, Eva and I. So we have been around for 24 years. I think they have a strong partnership over the years, and I think that look, I think there's still a lot to do in the sector, because I sometimes feel that what we are doing is a little bit considered niche. While we had the presentation by Daniela before, the population of seniors who were born overseas or from mainly non-English speak is actually a huge proportion of the community. It's not like just a minority we are talking about. So I think we are actually advocating at the moment for very targeted approach to aged care, whether it's through multicultural aged care strategy or an updating of the diversity framework, because we need to acknowledge that unfortunately not everybody is included in mainstream communities, and that's why we do training to aged care providers to help them. And we do it in a number of ways, whether it's webinars like here today, whether we have a targeted approach to our diversity coaching and mentoring. But I think, and that's the other thing, sometimes there's a bit of fear to do the right thing or to do what's needed, because organizations, they need sometimes a bit of hand-holding, targeted advice and support. So I guess in a nutshell, I think we'll still be around for many, many years. Because unfortunately we're not there yet, that we can say it's a totally inclusive society we are living in.
And I think, by the time I'm 97 or 127, hopefully we got it right. we are all working on it and are very committed and passionate. I was going to ask Daniela, because you are working on a couple of projects live as we speak, and in particular, I wanted to ask you about some of the work we've done in simplifying the messages that governments, aged care providers want to put out there to the community. Can you maybe take us through briefly about some of the techniques that you've seen we use at Polaron to engage all the multicultural Australians?
Sure, Eva. So one of the main things that we always have to do is first understand what is the main or the source document, what is the message that our client wants to transfer to their communities, and based on that, just to be able to propose a solution. Because of course we want to be as loyal as possible to the message, but always thinking on which are the ways that those particular communities receive information in those languages, because that is also very important to keep in mind. Even though when you, and Nikki said that before, even though when you could translate in different languages, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the same for every single person, for every single community or culture. So we always keep in mind that, just try to think what is the best approach for those that are going to be receiving the information. And also, one of the recommendations that we do is using easy and plain English resources as a way to allow that those elders that aren't able to understand information, because probably even though when they have been living in Australia for years, because that happened, many of them probably they don't know how to speak English well. They don't know how to access to information in English. So we always try to involve their language, but when it's not possible, at least to involve a plain English or easy English resource to allow that most people can access to the information and can understand it. And also try to always recommend using a large format of the resources, and accessibility tagging on the resources to allow also that if the elder of the caregiver that is going to help that person just to access to the information also can go to one of those services that are available in some of the laptops, and also read loud the message and be able to access the information, because that is the main goal and the main challenge. And I think that is one of our main goals at Polaron, is not just having translations that is going to be sit in one folder in one computer, but having translation that really are going to be useful for the communities, that the communities are going to be able to approach them and happy to disseminate them, because they believe that is a good resource to share with others.
Brilliant. So it's about maximizing the reach, simplifying the message, and also reading the source text in a way that, if we can understand it ourselves, because we often put ourselves into the shoes of the person that's going to read it, maybe there are some changes that we need to make to the document, and often we'll be liaising with Elliot, clarifying certain concepts, or just making sure that we understand. Because if we don't understand, the translator cannot translate it to make it understandable in the other language. The source text is also quite important. And Nikki, in terms of connecting with the older Australians, what are some of the challenges that you are seeing? Is it the digital divide? Is it just the total overwhelm with how much information is thrown at them? Is it maybe lack of understanding of the system? Is that something else? Could you talk us through it, please?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think there's a number of issues. I just want to mention that we have a number of free resources on our Culturally Diversity Common website, and it includes an effective co-design practice guide with consumers from culturally linguistically diverse backgrounds. And that mentions actually that, for example, that it takes really time to build trust and relationship with seniors. And that also when it comes to, I guess, engaging with seniors, a lot of them, they're socially isolated. And it was mentioned before, I think You mentioned that, Daniela, before in your presentation. So there's a lot of social isolation. How do we overcome that? And for example, here in Victoria, I don't know, people are probably watching from the whole country, but there are around 1,000 ethnic and multicultural senior citizens clubs, and a lot of them, provide that sort of social support and where people, feel a sense of connection and belonging. I think when it comes to challenges, we often don't know where these seniors clubs are, how to engage with the community because of whether, people maybe not speaking the language, maybe because of language reversion, maybe because they worked, in factories for many, many years. And then when they have, go in retirement, like their language, English skills, and they change. So I think there is all that sort of understanding of, I guess sometimes people don't recognize, how challenging it can be to, to be a second language speaker. And people often don't have that sort of sensitivity. So I think, language service are really an essential part. It's a human right. And in the exposure draft of the Aged Care draft, of the Aged Care Act, there's actually recognized, language and communication as a right and as a need. So I think I didn't 100% answer your question, Eva, but I think, challenges, I think, it's whether it's literacy, whether it's cultural or, religious sensitivities, whether it's knowing where to reach people, and that many, unfortunately, experience social isolation. So, how can we engage? How can we build relationship with these seniors? Because as you said, it's not just making a translation, also knowing the community. I know you at Polaron, you're very good with that, Eva. You really know the community very well, and you engage very significantly with the community. So it's a bit of a back and forth process, I would say.
And so, of course, it's a combination of all of the above, and there's no one size fits all solution. That is something you are probably experiencing, Elliot, in your line of work, where you've worked with hundreds of providers over the course of the initiative. What are you seeing as some of the challenges, and where can we improve our practice? What can we do better?
So the challenge is if we split them into two kind of groups, like two sides of the communication two-way street, effectively from the point of view of the older Australian who's receiving aged care, aside from everything that's been mentioned, I'd second that, but also things like not always having family to help. A lot of people sometimes still will always rely on family members, friends, or some of the community groups that Nikki also mentioned as well, to assist with the communication barrier. So somebody might receive a set of assets or instructions about, the next steps for their aged care service, for example. And then, they're being led through that with family and friends sometimes, but not everybody has that. Like not everybody has that resource to draw from. And then you would move on to things like, naturally, the nonverbal cues, often differ between different languages and cultures as well. So that's just something that, people are mindful of when they're trying to bridge that communication gap. Then once you get into the weeds of like actually translating materials, what's on the page, you've got a couple of, examples of cultural specificity of terms of, or the challenges of explaining a particular concept if it's not understood in an everyday sense in a particular culture, region, age bracket, etc. And then on top of that, you've got, just general technological literacy. Some of the things that Daniela talked about, they're just amazing. Things like text-to-speech and accessibility tagging. Yeah. If somebody's using a screen reader to help navigate, large format text, being able to increase it's just a simple act of zooming in on an iPad. Not everybody's aware of that, all of those things that, so ideally that's all something that technological literacy is something that can improve. And then the other side of the street, from the aged care specific challenges, aside from, time and resources, like those staff changes, do institutional knowledge about, where is everything within a particular business? Where is the stuff translated? What needs to be translated? Who have we got in the building? Who are we looking after? What are the languages spoken? When staff move in and out of a service, that becomes a challenge. There are small ways in which we try to address that. So when we translate documents for an aged care provider, we don't just think of and Polaron helps us with this. We don't just think of the person who needs to read it, so the older Australian, but also the staff. So, what does a file name need to be? So it's like service agreement in Hindi, for example. But what if it's printed so they can't see what that language is? Then, so, a language tag or a bilingual heading that says service agreement, or let's say consent form and in Hindi. Things like that, document IDs, language tags, to help people manage that and manage it quickly, so that they're not like, well, I know I need to help communicate with this particular person, but I've been stitched up because I haven't been set up, to be able to do it fastly, to do it quickly and accurately. So logistical challenges, cultural challenges, none of it's easy, but definitely everybody on this call is definitely having a go at and trying to make a dent in it all.
We're definitely trying. And the other important point that I would like to make is that when there's a language barrier, the communication is never 100% accurate. And we also need to acknowledge that. So yes, we are trying, yes, we are simplifying, but there are constraints and there are challenges around how to communicate with people effectively. And I think, as Nikki said, some things have progressed a lot. And as Elliot said, technology is there to support us, but some things are still haven't been fixed. And if we had to had a Royal Commission into aged care, given all the work we've been doing, then I guess we still have a bit of a way to go. We have a whole heap of questions. Like, it's been one of the most popular webinars we've ever done. So I'm going to hand over to Carla, because we've got about 7 or 8 minutes to cover all the questions that people are asking. Go for it.
Yes, thank you so much, Eva. Yeah, we have a lot of questions. So I think some of these questions we already touched some points of these questions, but one question from the public is, what impact can intergenerational communication have on bridging gaps between younger and older generations?
Nikki, Elliot, anyone wants to take
happy
that one?
to start.
Go for it.
Carla. I think we know that interesting. A lot of people, who migrated here and came with their parents, or so the second generation of Greek Australians or whatever it is. They are in a situation where they grew up in the Greek environment, and some of them even maybe haven't spoken English until they went to school for various reasons, because they sort of grew up in a sort of Greek-speaking community. But they never actually some of them haven't seen their grandparents age, because they came together with their parents, so they don't have that experience of aging. So and then a generation where they care for their elderly parents, but also they usually have children, so they're sort of in that sort of sandwich situation. And I guess in terms of navigating that in a way that I often feel that the second generation, even they have a very strong Greek, but it's a very different experience for them than for their parents, because their parents, often they would need someone with them to go to the doctor, and we know they should use an interpreter. But what happens, and Eva will probably know that, is that a lot of people, they will check their children to interpret for a number of reasons. So
cut corners, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a thing that is obviously not appropriate, but it happens. And yeah, so I think I'll leave it there for the moment.
Thank you. Elliot, anything you'd like to contribute?
Yeah, on top of that, I think helping with technological education, if younger members of the family are spending time, with their older relatives, taking some of that time to help equip them with some of those skills and show them that it's not so scary, and then open their minds and increase their independence and agency, I think, with computers. But also, if somebody's enrolled in an aged care service and it's your father, mother is in an aged care service, and you're seeing these documents and materials and whatnot that are only being produced in English, helping put up your hand, perhaps on behalf of the person in the aged care, to talk to their care coordinator and say, this would be beneficial. So I think, helping them with the technological side of things, but then also, raising the hand, establishing trust between like the aged care recipient and the aged care provider. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it takes a long time, but if a family are there to help, ask for things, because you can ask for these things, it's being able to speak up for them, I think, can be beneficial as well.
Great. And Daniela did show us on her graph, I think something like 78% of elderly Australians do have a digital device. I have an aunt that's 97 and she watches YouTube videos and news and all kinds of things. It's just that she needed to be enabled to do that. So I think if we can help people access information in a way that works for them, that's the first and very important step, because then they have, they feel empowered to use it. Another question, maybe we have time for one or two, Carla.
Yes, of course. And adding to that, also the younger generations are the one that kind of teach the older generations how to use the phone, how to just click on the system. So yeah, that happened to me with my grandma. I'm so happy to help her with everything that I can. So another question is, what measures can be implemented to ensure that communications and emergency communication systems are accessible and effective for older individuals during crisis?
Because we've had a few failures, and I'll get Elliot to speak to that. But one of the things that did happen recently was when the Optus network went down. So I know that that was a wake-up call where essentially the government had to step in and make sure that emergency phone calls are available. Elliot, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just from where I sit with this translation service, we translate a lot of materials. I've mentioned service agreements, handbooks, onboarding, provision of care stuff, but also particular to this, if a residential aged care facility requires signage or emergency protocols, facility-specific emergency documentation, so like an evac plan, etc. That is definitely something for which they can come to the service and say, hi, we're a facility. We require this information in these languages, and that is something that can be undertaken. Yeah.
I think we have another time for one more question. One more. So we know that we are ethical language providers. What are the ethical considerations when in targeted messaging directed at older consumers or elders?
I might start. So ethical considerations for me include things like, should we be even translating this thing? Can people actually read this thing in any language? Is having 80 pages a good idea? And then translate it into top 20 languages, knowing that probably no one's going to read it. For me, that's unethical, because translation is expensive, translation is difficult, and if we know that we're just ticking boxes, that's unethical for me. Anything else you wanted to add, Nikki, Elliot, and Daniela?
I think in terms of a communication, that context, I think, a translation is one side of thing. The other thing is, whether it's interpreting services or bilingual information or care, whatever, is because sometimes when it comes to these sort of situations where you have to make a quick decision, a translation might not do it in that situation. So I think it depends as well on the format, what will work well, and what I know a lot of people talk about real-time translation service, but we're not there in that sort of sense. We don't have that at the moment. And I think when it comes to translation as well, they need to be sure they're accurate. So how accurate can you be when you have to be really, really quick in terms of turnaround? So I think ethical is, I think also being more sort of embracive of multilingualism in Australia. I think we could learn from Europe in that regard, that it's actually an asset and not, seeing that as an asset, and maybe work on that a little bit more, that we see that as an asset and the strengths of us as Australia, because Australia is a multicultural and multilingual nation. I think there's no doubt, but we're not necessarily harnessing that fully.
Yeah, that's very true. Elliot, you can have the last word. We have 1 minute. Something to add?
Of course, thank you. From our point of view, running a translation service, a huge ethical consideration is the quality of the translation. We've actually, sometimes I present this to on a grassroots level to aged care providers or industry groups, etc. And sometimes I've been asked more than a few times, like, is this just thrown into Google Translate? And I get the wonderful response is no. There's actually a very rigorous quality assurance process, NADI certification, there are processes in place to ensure that you can't just, go, all right, we'll translate that and, throw it into the Google machine. There is a pretty robust system to ensure that what that person then is handed to read has had real care and expertise put into it.
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of work that goes on behind the scenes. So everyone, I lied. Elliot is not having the last word. Daniela's having the last word. Daniela, can you do translations that are cheap, fast, and good, or what gives?
It's hard to do everything in one go. That's why it's always very important just to think, okay, what is your priority? Just get this done and that's it and forget about it, or really have something that the community is going to use. So I think that my answer is not always is possible. It could be possible in some cases, but it's not something that happens very often.
No, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you. Over to you, Carla.
Thank you so much. To everyone out there, Happy New Year. It's so exciting to be back with this webinar series. If you do have any language services related inquiries or questions, please contact me at carla.f@polaron.com.au. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn for more Polaron. You have a QR code here that it will directly to our web page. If you have any feedback for us, please fill out our survey. I also wanted to say a big thanks to Nikki, to Elliot, Daniela, and Eva. Thank you so much for all your comments, your experience, and for being here. You've been wonderful. Thank you once again to everyone for joining us in this webinar, and we hope you enjoy. There's much more to come in the coming months, so stay tuned and see you next time.